Before we get into the book, I do want to say that this reading level of Fablehaven is about grades 3rd to 8th grade, but I would say that it might be a little too much for grades under 4th. So I would say 4th graders and up are good to read this book. But of course, double check with your parents, make sure they're okay with it too. Hi guys, welcome back. Today we are starting Fablehaven, the first 5 minutes of it. So grab a snack, get comfortable, snuggle up next to a pet, and just relax and listen to this amazing book. Fablehaven. Chapter 1, A Mandatory Vacation. Kendra stared out the side window of the SUV, watching foliage blur past. When the flurry of motion became too much, she looked up ahead and fixed her gaze on a particular tree. Following it as she slowly approached, streaked past, and then gradually receded behind her. Was life like that? You could look ahead to the future or back at the past, but the present moved too quickly to absorb? Maybe sometimes. Not today. Today they're driving along an endless 2-lane highway through the forested hills of Connecticut. Why didn't you tell us Grandpa Sorensen lived in India? Seth complained. Her brother was 11 and heading into 6th grade. He had grown wary of his handheld video game, evidence that they were on a truly epic drive. Mom twisted to face the back seat. It won't be much longer. Enjoy the scenery. I'm hungry, Seth said. Mom started rummaging through a grocery bag full of snack food. Peanut butter and crackers? Seth reached forward for the crackers. Dad, driving, asked for some almond roca. Last Christmas, he had decided that almond roca was his favorite candy and that he should always have some on hand all year long. Nearly 6 months later, he was still honoring his resolution. Do you want anything, Kendra? I'm fine. Kendra returned her attention to the frantic parade of trees. Her parents were leaving on a 17-day Scandinavian cruise with all the aunts and uncles on her mother's side. They were all going for free. Not because they'd won a contest. They were going on a cruise because Kendra's grandparents had asphyxiated. Grandma and Grandpa Larson had been visiting relatives in South Carolina. The relatives lived in a trailer, and the trailer had some malfunction involving a gas leak, and they all died in their sleep. Long ago, Grandma and Grandpa Larson had specified that when they died, all of their children and their spouses were to use an allocated sum of money to go on a Scandinavian cruise. The grandchildren were not invited. Won't you get bored stuck on a boat for 17 days? Kendra asked. Dad glanced at her in a rearview mirror. The food is supposed to be incredible. Snails, fish eggs, the works. We're not all that thrilled about the trip, Mom said sadly. I don't think your grandparents envisioned an accidental death when they made this request, but we'll make the best of it. The ship stops in ports as you go, Dad said, deliberately redirecting the conversation. You get to disembark for part of the time. Is this card going to last 17 days? Seth asked. We're nearly there, Dad said. Do we have to stay with Grandma and Grandpa Sorensen? Asked Kendra. It'll be fun, Dad said. You should feel honored. They almost never invite anyone to stay with them. Exactly, we barely know them. They're hermits. Well, they were my parents, Dad said. Somehow I survived. The road stopped winding through forested hills as it passed through a town. They idled at a stoplight, and Kendra stared at an overweight woman gassing up her minivan. The front windshield of the minivan was dirty, but the woman seemed to have no intention of washing it. Kendra glanced up front. The windshield of the SUV was filthy, smeared with dead bugs, even though Dad had squeegeed it when they last stopped to refuel. They had driven all the way from Rochester today. Kendra knew that Grandma and Grandpa Sorensen had not invited them to stay. She'd overheard when Mom had approached Grandpa Sorensen about letting the kids stay with them at their house. It was the funeral. The Larsons were the grandparents who had been part of her life. They had shared many holidays and long visits. Kendra could hardly remember spending the time with Grandma and Grandpa Sorensen. They had inherited some estate in Connecticut around the time her parents were married. The Sorensens had never invited them to visit and rarely made the trek out to Rochester. When they came, it was generally one or the other. They had only come over twice. The Sorensens were nice, but their visits had been too infrequent and brief for real bonding to occur. Kendra knew that Grandma had taught history at some college, and Grandpa had traveled a lot, running a small importing business. That was about it. Everyone was surprised when Grandpa Sorensen showed up at the funeral. It had been more than 18 months since either the Sorensens had visited. He had apologized that his wife could not attend because she was feeling ill. There always seemed to be an excuse. Sometimes Kendra wondered if they were secretly divorced. Toward the end of the wake, Kendra overheard Mom cajoling Grandpa Sorensen to watch the kids. They were in a hallway around a corner from the viewing area. Kendra heard them talking before she reached the corner and paused to eavesdrop. Why can't they stay with Marcy? Normally they would, but Marcy's coming on the cruise. Kendra peeked around the corner. Grandpa Sorensen was wearing a brown jacket with patches on the elbows and a tie. Where are Marcy's kids going? To her in-laws. What about a babysitter? 2.5 weeks is a long time for a sitter. I remember you'd mentioned having them over sometime. Yes, I recall. Does it have to be late June? Why not July? The cruise is on a time frame. What's the difference? Things get extra busy around then. I don't know, Kate. I'm out of practice with children. Stan, I don't want to go on this cruise. It was important to my parents, so we're going. I don't mean to twist your arm. Mom sounded on the verge of tears. Grandpa Sorensen sighed. I suppose we could find a place to lock them up. Kendra moved away from the hall at that point. She'd quietly worried about staying with Grandpa Sorensen ever since. Alright, so that concludes our first 5 minutes of Fablehaven. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Give this video a like, and tomorrow there will be another video with 5 more minutes of the story. Thanks for watching.